avant-garde of the nuclear renaissance. So whether you are in industry or in academia, you have the knowledge on which the UK's nuclear renaissance will be built. You're part of the march of the makers. You're part of the export of Britain's educational excellence. You're key to achieving the growth we need. So let me start by saluting you and urging you to go out and sell your knowledge. Now, that might not be quite what you expected from the head of Counter-Proliferation. I am, after all, concerned primarily with security. And to be honest, the most secure thing of the lot would be if none of you sold any of your knowledge. I believe we are, though, in a partnership to promote the safe and secure use of nuclear technology. And I want to explain a little bit about what government does on non-proliferation and nuclear security. I thought I'd illustrate today's talk with a few faces. Let's see if this works. There's the first. Ronald Reagan, of course, who said some of my favorite lines, actually, of any speaker. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." So when someone from government says they're in partnership with you, you should be cautious. We'll say more on that later. Second place, that one. Probably more familiar or more expected in a talk about nuclear power. Albert Einstein said, "Our world faces a crisis as yet unperceived by those possessing great power for good or evil. The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything, save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift towards unparalleled catastrophe." My job is trying to avoid that unparalleled catastrophe. Non-proliferation is about preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and their means of delivery to other states. Nuclear security is about keeping nuclear materials and technology secure from non-state actors. So what brings together non-proliferation and nuclear security is frustrating those, whether state or non-state actors, whose goals are malign. That makes them different from nuclear safety, which is about avoiding accidental explosions and radiation. Other parts of government lead on that, and I'm sure you know an awful lot more about avoiding explosions and radiation than me. The main plank of the world's non-proliferation arrangements is the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968, which entered into force in 1970. And if there's one instrument to avoid Einstein's unparalleled catastrophe, this is it. The treaty divides states into 5 nuclear weapon states, which are those that had conducted nuclear explosions by 1968. So that's the US, UK, France, Russia, and China, and the non-nuclear weapon states, which is all the others. And of course, almost by definition, you have a third category, which is states that never accepted the treaty at all: India, Pakistan, and Israel. So Iran is a non-nuclear weapon state. DPRK, North Korea, is in another category of its own, having tried to leave the treaty. It accepted it and then sought to leave. The treaty contains a grand bargain based on 3 pillars. Non-proliferation is the first. Nuclear weapon states undertake not to transfer nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons technology. That's to anyone. And the non-nuclear weapon states undertake not to seek or receive it. Second pillar is peaceful uses. All the parties undertake to facilitate the fullest possible exchange of equipment, materials, and scientific and technological information for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And I imagine that's the field most of you are involved in. The third limb is disarmament. The parties undertake to pursue negotiations on effective measures to nuclear disarmament and on a treaty on general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. So as I say, you're all engaged, I think, in peaceful uses, or most of you. In other words, the normal civilian use of nuclear energy. Facilitating that peaceful use of nuclear energy is part of the grand bargain by which the rest of the world accepted our nuclear weapons. It comes as a surprise to some to know that another part of that bargain is that we are under an obligation to disarm, or at least to pursue negotiations on effective measures to disarm, which over time is surely much the same thing. The Marshall Islands have started proceedings against the nuclear weapon states in the International Court of Justice and also in the US courts against the US. asserting that we and the other nuclear weapons states are not meeting that obligation. Needs to say, I think the UK record is very strong. We, like the US, Russia and France, have massively reduced the number of warheads we have. Then there's non-proliferation, the third pillar. This is where your interest in spreading knowledge can come into conflict with the public interest in preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. While you help countries, companies and students exercise their inalienable right, and the treaty does use that term, to research, produce and use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, I hope you will be acutely aware of the danger that they are trying to acquire technology for nuclear weapons. I acknowledge that the Non-Proliferation Treaty is, in a sense, unfair. It allows the nuclear weapons states, but no one else, to have nuclear weapons. Like all works of man, I suggest it's imperfect. I would argue, though, that it is by far the best treaty that anyone could negotiate, and the only realistic alternative at present to a complete free-for-all. So if you're uncertain whether someone is asking for something legitimate and they're putting pressure on you about the inalienable right to peaceful use of nuclear energy, do remember the other parts of the treaty, and by all means ask them what their alternative is when they say that that treaty is unfair, and how life would be better for them, or indeed for the rest of mankind, if we didn't have this treaty. So it's not perfect, but I really do think it's much the best we can achieve at the moment, and much the best we've had for 50 or 60 years, and much the best we're likely to have for some time to come. So what are the biggest challenges under the Non-Proliferation Treaty? The two clearest are Iran, there we are, another face, the supreme leader. He says that the nuclear bomb is un-Islamic, and that Iran just wants to exercise its right to peaceful uses of energy. But Iran's enrichment activities far exceed any credible peaceful uses, and Iran's secrecy over its program inevitably leads to suspicion. If you have dealings with any organization linked to Iran, please be very careful. DPRK, another face. DPRK has the bomb and are working hard to improve it and the means of delivery. It's a country like no other, of course, and one of their challenges is financing their nuclear weapons program. And if you come across a DPRK company, and they do operate worldwide, and they operate wherever they can, there are many DPRK companies in Africa, for example, the chances are that one way or another, that company is operating to raise money for DPRK's nuclear weapons. Then there are the countries which have always been outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty and have always posed the biggest challenge to its logic: India, Pakistan, and Israel. They have not broken the rules because they never accepted the rules. India and Pakistan have declared nuclear weapons. Israel neither confirms nor denies that it has nuclear weapons. All three say they are committed to applying the same rules on exports as nuclear weapon states, which is of course welcome, and we encourage it. Because they are outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they are not obliged not to receive nuclear weapons and technology from the UK. Apologies for that double negative. We are, though, obliged not to transfer it to them. And while Pakistan and India are, in a sense, in a relationship of mutually assured destruction, or something pretty close to it, Israel's weapons are, of course, a running sore for many in the Arab world. Moving on, the system's not perfect, and we all make mistakes. There's another face. He's the world's most notorious proliferator, A.Q. Khan. A.Q. Khan was a good student in Germany and the Netherlands, and then a scientist in Urenco, owned jointly by the German, Dutch, and British governments. No one wanted to deny him the knowledge to make peaceful use of nuclear energy, or doubt his commitment to that cause. So he was handed Urenco's centrifuge plans. He took them back to Pakistan, started enrichment in Pakistan, and sold the technology globally. There's a concern that many other countries too will want to obtain a nuclear weapons capability. Many Gulf states, for example, have not signed up to all the international agreements to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to confirm that their programs are for purely peaceful purposes, and that leads to concern over what their intentions might be over the medium or long term. Let me turn briefly to nuclear security and the international strand of the government's nuclear security work. We know that terrorist groups have sought to obtain nuclear material, The danger of a dirty bomb spreading radiation, though without a nuclear explosion, is of course well known. President George W. Bush launched the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism, which you may come across, and President Obama has put enormous effort and political capital into the Nuclear Security Summit process. Both are aimed at preventing terrorists getting hold of nuclear material. Our awareness of the terrorist threat has led us to seek to increase the security of the materials and knowledge you handle, even if you are not involved in nuclear weapons work. So I hope the academics among you will be aware that we explored the possibility of a code of conduct, and those in industry may have heard of the Nuclear Industry Summit, which took place alongside the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague in March this year. Both initiatives are about encouraging you, the practitioners, to establish and implement best practice to prevent the spread of your knowledge to those who want to use it for malign purposes. This brings me back to my partnership point. As I say, I believe we are in a partnership to promote the safe and secure use of nuclear technology, and I hope you agree, even though I am from the government. If that partnership is to work, if we are to avoid either Einstein's unparalleled catastrophe or an event which at the very least leads to such concerns that it kills the nuclear renaissance, we all need to be acutely aware of the dangers. Governments need to play their role to prevent materials and knowledge falling into the wrong hands, and the overwhelming majority of states have agreed that this means not allowing nuclear weapons-related materials and knowledge to fall into any hands. Governments, though, do not have exclusive possession of sensitive knowledge. You have much of it. So governments depend on you to be alert to the danger and not to spread knowledge relevant to nuclear weapons. We rely on you to be suspicious and to make sure you know who you're dealing with. So let me conclude by saluting you again and repeating my encouragement to you to go out and sell and make the most of your knowledge. Please, though, do so in a way which makes the unparalleled catastrophe Einstein feared less likely, not more. So please be aware of the responsibilities on your shoulders. Thank you.
Thank you very much.